The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Blake Anderson, cryptographic economist.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show.
Tone Vase from Liberty Life Trail.
Hey everyone, coming to you from Hong Kong, 6 a.m. here. Shout out to Larry Salibra because he went down to Consensus in New York and allowed me to stay at his place while he's away. So thanks, man.
Very cool. And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, Bitcoin 1900. Bitcoin has reached the earliest 20th century with yet another bull run, driving the price above the century mark. The move raised the market cap an additional $4 billion, and the price of Bitcoin has nearly doubled in the year 2017 alone. Blake Anderson, your thoughts on the dramatic rise in Bitcoin's price?
The rise and rise of Bitcoin. It's an interesting thing. It's like the Wild West mixed with technology, mixed with the 1920s run up. So there's all kinds of stuff going on, and also kind of like the .com boom. I think that the price of Bitcoin and the total crypto market cap is it's doing really well. But I do worry a little bit about in the .com boom, all kinds of stuff collapsed really quickly. All together. So I hope that a lot of these gains are going to be, permanent and staked in and stuff. I'm not quite as worried about the Bitcoin pullback as I am about the pullback in some of these projects that function differently than Bitcoin. I made some money in Ripple, and a lot of people that I know have made some money in Ripple, but now I am starting to fear the dial back. I made a little bit of money in Ripple ephemerally by just saying, let's just play the rumor mill. There's about 1 billion Ripple coin out there, and they're held by certain people and stuff, so you can really kind of game how that goes up and down. But now it's starting to get a little bit scary. I hope that people are going to take some profits and not lose everything if there's a correction. There also may not be a correction because they continue to actually shape the way that their offerings are out there pretty well. So I think that this is all good. Anytime the price spikes, do a security audit, secure your stuff, maybe unload some things from exchanges, do things that are going to help make your profits more real, even if it's not turning them into your fiat currency. And I guess that's my strongest recommendation to remind people of when we're hitting all-time highs. When there's when there's huge corrections down and there's blood in the gutter, it's time to buy. And when things are really high, it's time to take some profits and time to secure things up. That being said, I'm not going to predict that this is going to slow down anytime soon. I just want people that are investing in the space to be able to make good money and continue to have those people that are doing that be well funded and then continue to go and tell other people to invest in that way. So that's my kind of big MO here.
Excellent points, Blake. And thanks to our 106 live viewers. Everyone give us a thumbs up and a share and a like and maybe a comment in the chat. Thanks to everyone who's active during the chat too. We're going to look at that after the show. And I just wanted to follow up on Blake's point and notice this incredible chart that I found recently. This is the chart of Isaac Newton and his investments in one of the very first stock market bubbles. It was called the South Sea stock. And between December of 1718 and December of 1721, Isaac Newton lost his entire fortune. And this is a very smart guy. None of us are as smart as Isaac Newton. But as you can see with the chart, here Newton invests a bit. Here Newton exits happy. He's got his returns. Things are good. He just needs to hold. Then Newton's friends get rich and he feels bad. And everyone knows what that's like, the FOMO. Then Newton re-enters with a lot, right? This is the big bad move. He goes back in. It goes up over the bubble. And down here, Newton exits, broke. So disastrous turn for Isaac Newton. Let's go to Tone Vase. Your thoughts on the Bitcoin price?
Oh man, so that's a great chart actually. I'm gonna probably utilize that. I forgot all about that, how Newton lost everything in the South Sea bubble. It's no different than the tulip mania. It's the same thing. And that's how I see all like this entire ICO bubble, the altcoin bubble, the Ethereums, the Ripple, the NAMs, all of the ICOs is gonna end so badly. But I do think that Bitcoin would be the safety net for all that insanity when it implodes. Everyone always thinks they're going to get out at the top, but nobody ever does. A few people do. But let's just get real quick to the Bitcoin price. Those that watch my show know that I was talking about this symmetric triangle that I expected to break to the upside. I had this previous high resistance on Bitfinex. We actually hit exactly $2,000. We've now pulled back a little bit. Would have been nicer to pull all the way back to 1900, but we didn't even fall that far. And my immediate target is about 2020 on Bitfinex, and then all the way up to 2150 for a more bullish target. And we're busting out of all the channels on Bitcoin, which is not good. I would have liked to have seen us stay in this sub-green channel. This is Bitstamp. Now, when Bitfinex hit 2000, Bitstamp was only at 1950. However, about an hour or two ago, the difference in price between Bitstamp and Bitfinex was only $10. Like an hour or two ago, I saw Bitstamp at 1940 and Bitfinex at 1950. So the two exchanges are near parity, and we can now somewhat use them interchangeably. I don't see a huge bubble in Bitcoin yet because I'm comparing it to, the Ripples and the NAMs and the Ethereums and the Dash, and that's just insanity on that side. And yeah, I think Bitcoin's going to slow down a little bit, but I'm not seeing a big pullback anytime soon.
Now, how can Bitcoiners deal with this? The price is truly astronomical. You're saying things like a pullback to 1900. You're saying things like an advance to 2150. How can someone who got into Bitcoin maybe around 300 or 500, 700 these days, what should they do differently now that the price is up?
It depends why they got into Bitcoin. If I got into Bitcoin because I really think that Bitcoin is going to change the world. So I'm not selling. I'm not selling unless I see, let's say, if Bitcoin went up to about $5,000 to $7,000 this summer, I would then consider selling because then I would consider Bitcoin in a bubble. But as long as it's going up somewhat steady, and I would say we're pushing the boundary of whether the price of Bitcoin is going up slow and steady or exponential bubble land. We're like right on that line. And I still think Bitcoin is the cream of the crop, and nothing even comes close. So as long as I think that, I'm going to stay with Bitcoin. I am here's what worries me. Recent tweets by Luke Dash Jr. Talking good things about Litecoin and that Litecoin will be innovating with SegWit and Bitcoin can't adopt SegWit. So if our core developers are starting to doubt that Bitcoin can be innovative going forward without SegWit, that would worry me a little bit, but I'm not there yet. Those doubts are very slowly starting to creep in, but I still believe that we will get SegWit by end of summer, either activated or guaranteed to activate this year, and that would solve a lot of the
All right, so a couple of follow-ups. First, it's a problem if Bitcoin goes up too fast because then it has to go down, right? That's the first thing for everyone at home, right? Just basic refresher, right?
Right.
And then the second thing is that I'm worried that because of the basically we have this influx of new Bitcoiners, probably from Japan, maybe from other countries, Australia, other countries have had positive Bitcoin regulation. I think we've kind of detached from the technical situation. I know a lot of people were fearful around 900, 1200. We were seeing a possible pullback to 400 because of a fork or a split. And it seems like now we've just brushed aside these potential technical problems and moved on with the hype of a bunch of newbies. Is that the problem, Tone?
No, I don't think that's the problem. I just think that if Bitcoin, like right now, the blocks are pretty full. Now, they're pretty full. I would say 70% of the blocks are like spam from bad actors. Like it doesn't belong there, right? So but the blocks are still full. And as the price of Bitcoin goes up, your transaction fee goes up by default because transaction fees are calculated in Satoshis per byte. And if one Satoshi is 4 times the price that it was 3 months ago, your default fee automatically goes up 4 times. A lot of people don't realize this. And this is another reason why we need SegWit and we need to start to scale off chain. Bigger blocks do not solve the problem of fees being calculated in Satoshis per byte. And if a Bitcoin is $20,000, one Satoshi is pretty damn expensive at that point. And people need to think about that. We need SegWit on multiple levels. So if Bitcoin goes up in price, it will become very difficult to use Bitcoin, a lot more difficult than now. And we're just going to hit a point where people get frustrated and start to sell, take their profits. I mean, if they're, and also keep in mind, the way markets work, and this is how they work during the South Sea bubble, this is how they work during the tulip mania. Markets are designed so that the maximum amount of people lose the maximum amount of money. So I would not be surprised if Bitcoin did go to like 5,000 to 7,000 this summer. The scaling problem is not solved. Everyone like gets frustrated with Bitcoin, dumps Bitcoin, puts all that money into altcoins, creating the biggest altcoin bubble the world has ever seen, bigger than the South Sea bubble. Then all of that goes to zero, and then Bitcoin slowly rises from the dead. And but at that point, so many people would have lost money. It would be like the South Sea bubble. It's just
And
one more scenario.
that's the thing about Bitcoin is we forget how new this is, how quickly the money can flow back and forth, and how relatively small these markets are. Things like Tone's describing can happen in almost an instant with no real regulation or anything to stop it or slow it. There's no circuit breakers, nothing like that.
Regulation certainly does slow recovery.
One last
collapses too. Go ahead, Tom.
One last point. Those that are trading ICOs and altcoins, if you were not trading during the dot-com bubble, I strongly recommend you to go and Google the stories from the dot-com bubble. I was learning how to trade in 2004, 2005, and the people that were teaching me how to trade were all part of the dot-com bubble. And the stories they told us back then were unbelievable. Pets.com is just what you hear. That wasn't even like in the top 100 of the crazy stupid shit people came up with and got tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. Please go and Google it. I strongly recommend it.
We're also joined by Mr. Chris Ellis. Chris, how's it going? What are your thoughts on the recent rise in Bitcoin price?
The shorters are wrecked. And when I say the shorters, I mean anyone not currently holding Bitcoin, because those are the people that are currently shorting it. It's anybody who is ignoring this space, who isn't paying attention, who isn't woke right now. And I'm talking about the SEC, and I'm talking about any of the people that are really. I don't attribute much of this to Japan. I attribute some of it to Japan. Those of us who on the kind of the whale pool chat room or the Bitcoin Mumble chat room, who are awake, many of the trading hours and looking at all the different trading platforms and the charts, will notice that Japan is very bullish, even when many of the other exchanges are just going sideways. The Japanese exchanges like Coin, etc., are mostly going up. That is true, but also they, like many of the exchanges during their early years, they've got zero trading fees, right? So it's cheap to trade on there. It's free to trade on there. So you don't know how much of that volume is real or whether it's the same trader just trading into themselves backwards and forwards because it doesn't cost them anything. I attribute a lot of it. I think a lot of it was down to Finex because of the banking problems and because of the ARB and because people wanted to get their money off of the exchange. And so they were converting into Bitcoin and they were using Litecoin and other different methods. And then people started to ARB because some customers were able to get domestic transfers out of Taiwan and then get it over into Coinbase or Kraken or wherever. And then, of course, once the spread narrowed, other customers would take advantage, buying up coins on the exchange. That would then drive the price up on Finex because it's a retail market, not a sophisticated one. All the other exchanges would follow suit. And so it would just create this self-perpetuating cycle. And I think other factors, like the fact that early on in this rally, Bitmain seemed to be out of the running. Like we had the amp bleed fiasco, we had various other things. And I think that when the SEC ruling initially didn't seem to, you know, when that support level held, I think it just signaled a very kind of, you know, very bullish sentiment within the market more generally. And we'd had like, you know, 2 or 3 years of a bearish run. And those coins are pretty scarce. We've already had a halving event. And so there aren't very many of those Bitcoins left. And it takes an awful lot of electricity to generate them. And so I think that's really what's kind of propelling this. And the word on the street is that what's really driving this is the spot. It's the OTC market. It's the fact that nowadays, you know, whereas it used to be the average person would spend $500 on a coin. Now they're only getting a fraction of a coin for $500, right? And so these OTC people on local Bitcoins, they don't have enough coins to keep up with the demand. People are coming to them, and the price on local Bitcoins far exceeds the price that they're paying on the exchange, usually 10 to 15%. Or in places like India, often they're paying $1,000 over the price that you would get on a Western exchange. So I don't know exactly how much I attribute it. And I think also, finally, it's also because of the rumors about the ETF, this second round, you know, the second, you know, slice of the pie. I think all of this, you know, put together just created the perfect storm, and people were cooking this narrative. And of course, you got the ICO. The people are talking about the ICO season, and we already had the other day Aragon, which raised 25 million in less than 10 minutes, I believe. I saw it. I didn't count it, but it felt like less than 10 minutes on the counter. I tried to buy some myself, but I couldn't get my MetaMask wallet ready in time. And I think we had Storage as well, raised some money as the other day or today. And we've got some more coming up, and Ethereum, of course, has been pumping ahead of the consensus. And then, of course, you've got the Ripple as well. Ripple's had a huge boost. I think it's slightly a bit of a manipulation of their cap table. It's not a blockchain per se. It's centralized. It predates Bitcoin, but they've seen a massive rise in their market cap just because it's a pre-mined coin. They own all of them. They mine them all. But because they've done some trickery with the accounting and they've said, okay, we're going to actually lock up these funds in an escrow with an Ethereum smart contract, and we're going to have this emission rate of like $1 billion per month, that's kind of signaled to the market that therefore these coins are not going to just be dumped at will by the founders, and that therefore these coins will somehow now be scarce. I'm not quite sure on what the connection is between the XRP and the value of the company and the offices they're in, but apparently
it feels like a lot of trust in a trustless space,
yeah.
doesn't it?
Well, no. I mean, there is a smart contract. Like, I don't think we have to trust. I mean, of course, I don't know if they can just produce more of them, because
I don't believe that it's non-trivial to produce more, but I do think that the trust of them being locked up or deciding to lock more up, and the amount that were mined initially versus the amount that certain whales have, I mean, it just feels like a lot of trust to me in terms of
I think what we have to trust is, for instance, like how many of them do exchange owners have, for example. Like, you know, I believe that we can trust to the cryptographics how many of the actual assets are going to be controlled by these banking institutions they've done deals with. I trust that because that's controlled by the cryptographics that they're doing, the cryptography that they're doing with the Ethereum smart contract, that they're rumored to be doing a demonstration of with a consensus next week. I think that what's more concerning is that for a long time now, the XRP that's been traded on Poloniex and Bitstamp, etc., has only been a small subset, about a third of the overall XRP in supply, and has traded at times less than a penny you know, because of all the XRP in existence, so many of them, so abundant. Now, because they've now said, well, first there were just rumors, and this is part of what concerns me about the whole enterprise, is that there were just rumors and speculation, and they've got XRP tip on Twitter. I didn't like the way it was handled, and I felt a little bit like this was a game. You know, Bitcoin's going up, great. How do we capture some of this attention? How do we get in on this? You know, how do we get the slice of the pie? We can't have Bitcoin just, you know, capture all of this market share. And I just felt a little bit like everyone, well, there was the SegWit thing, remember that? So everyone was going after the SegWit thing. And Litecoin and Charlie Lee went after it, and DigiByte went after it. DigiByte got SegWit activated. And of course, it's dead easy if you're just some shitcoin to get SegWit activated, because they're probably like, you know, 5 or 6 miners that are mining your shitcoin. And it's dead easy to get consensus, right? So you get SegWit activated, and every speculator and their mum goes mad over SegWit, and everyone buys your shitcoin. And so DigiByte goes viral, and those bag holders that have been holding it for 3 years, well, they can't believe their luck, because they probably lost like 10 Bitcoins on that shit, like, you know, 3 years ago. So they're fucking like, they're loving it. And it's fantastic. And there were lots of coins that went up massively, but Ripple went up more than anything else, because there were literally Ripple millionaires, people that own millions and millions of these things, because they were less than a penny. So more for me, it's a concern of like, you know, how many do the exchange owners have? How many do certain people have? Friends of the company, that kind of thing. And I don't know, it's been added to Bitfinex today, and you can see from my new lower third disclaimer, I do work for Finex. They are a client of mine. It was added today. I'm in two minds about it. Let's see how it happens. It can't be. It was added today because it can't be ignored any longer. It does have a huge market cap because of events over the last couple of weeks, and it was in demand. You know, people were coming to Finex and saying, "Look, you know, the Poloniex is suffering some problems. It's in high demand." Poloniex put out a press release saying, "Look, you know, huge numbers of users are coming to us. We are also suffering lots of attacks," and so, you know, people wanted to a place that they could trade this currency that's now in huge demand. And also, you know, shareholders were also asking for XRP to be traded on Finex. So it was added today. And I think I don't know how I feel about it, because I just sort of think that this price is very bubbly. I'm worried also about the ICO trend. I'm worried that Ethereum just suddenly shot up today by 1/6, you know, of its value, just suddenly just went, you know, added. How does that happen, by the way? How does a currency just do that the day before on a weekday, the weekend before a consensus event? It just this all feels very contrived. It doesn't feel very natural. It doesn't feel like a market event. It feels like,
well, remember, we do have very small markets that are moved by press events. Things like Ripple locking up a lot of their currency, like 14 billion or something. Things like Stellar producing a platform for their currency. They've gone up 100% end over end. These insane gains. How can we explain them?
Well, it's because there aren't many people in it, and there are the low liquidity on the exchange. But also, if you go to the XRP forum, you know, Joel Katz is in there, and he's, you know, people are posting up DMs that he's had with other people, or messages that he's had on group chats, you know, on these little apps, and they're sort of asking him leading questions like, you know, what are you going to say about this or that in the consensus thing? And he's like, oh, you guys, you're going to get me into trouble, you know, if I say too much. And it's like, yeah, you kind of say that, but, you know, Joel, you could just say nothing, like literally nothing. You could just choose not to respond. You could turn off the phone. You could choose not to talk on the forum, like just media blackout. But instead, you choose to say something, which just gets the speculators riled up.
But wait, Chris,
and the price goes up.
I'm sorry, who are you talking about? Who is that?
Joel, the chap from Joel Katz, the chap from Ripple. That is on the xrpchat.com forum.
Can I just comment on this?
Yeah,
a lot of these guys, all of these ICO guys, all of these Ethereum guys, they all know they're breaking the freaking law. They all know they're breaking SEC laws. So you ask them a serious question, and they're gonna like moonwalk away from it, because they're afraid to answer the goddamn question because they know it's a freaking security in their company. It's totally useless as an actual token. They know it's a security in their company. And you put them on the spot, they will not answer the question because they know that the SEC is going to nail their ass the moment they answer it. And this is the double-edged sword that they chose. They chose to be public people that made up this quasi-currency, quasi-security. And the only way they can pump this thing is if they're public people. Satoshi couldn't do that. He was anonymous, and it was an anonymous currency for Bitcoin. And these guys are trying to have the best of both worlds. They're trying to be public, they're trying to pump their scam, and at the same time, they're trying not to say too much, not to get arrested. And their luck is going to run out. I would say on most of them, their luck is going to run out.
Can I jump in really quick? I think this is just very big coincidentally. Simon Dixon was on the Bitcoin Miser show earlier, and he was talking about a lot of these, gains that are being made in these alts and stuff like that. When there's a correction, a lot of people that got burned are going to demand regulation. They're going to demand regulation, and he said that his fear was that all of these are going to be regulated as securities, except for Bitcoin, because you can't, because there's nobody that's in actual control over it. And when I was talking to him, I was like, "Do you think that there's anything that can be done to avoid that eventuality?" And his response was kind of, well, maybe eventually they'll get put into their new category, but something is going to happen with this stuff. So, I mean, I agree with Tone in terms of like, if somebody was like, hey, I have this company that I'm going to gift to you and make you the CEO and make you liable of it, and we're going to do all this kind of, securities-esque shenanigans, I'd be like, no, that's a level of liability that as a family man, like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Now, I do want to propose a counter argument to what Tone's been saying. There is a possibility that the rabbit's out of the hat here, that too many people are doing it for too much and it's too widespread. So the way to solve this is to regulate it as an existing industry. That means, to Tone's horror, they'll bring in the Ethereum guys, they'll bring in the altcoins, the Ripples, all these other people. They'll have a big conference. They'll agree on some basic rules, probably things that libertarians won't like, know your customer, other things. And then for either a fine, like Ripple has already paid. Remember, Ripple's already paid. They're legit in this game now, allegedly. But for a fine or for a shrug of the shoulders, there'll be a brand new industry here. Tone, what do you think? Is that going to happen? It's a possibility.
It's a possibility, and then people are going to, and all it will do...
I mean, I agree. It's horrifying. Like, these people are going to keep the millions that they've made. We don't know why they made them. They got them. They have them. It's etc.
They won't get to, trust me, they won't get to keep it. None of these people know what the hell they're doing. They got lucky with that money, and they're all going to lose their money. This is no different than a lottery ticket winner. 10 years after winning the lottery, most people are in a worse financial position than they were before winning the lottery. This is the same thing. None of these projects have any technical soundness whatsoever. None of these tokens are useful in any way, shape, or form. If the regulations do pull these guys in and allow them to regulate themselves, that's fine. All they're going to do is they're going to extend this bubble another 3 to 4 years, and then it'll just be a bigger crash when people realize that the emperor has no clothes with these developers.
Let's go to Chris Ellis. Seems like you've got something.
Yeah, I'm just pointing to the forum that I was talking about earlier. Yeah, so this was all the speculation, and also there were rumors about it being added to Coinbase. I mean, Finex are a company that likes to keep things very close to their chest, so that wasn't what was driving the price up. But there were rumors about it being added to various different exchanges, and of course rumors that they were going to do a demonstration, and this sort of screen grab from xrpchat.com about whether or not he was going to get into trouble for revealing about something about demonstrating something at the consensus conference next week in New York that will be recorded. And he says, well, I can't say anything without getting into trouble. And then of course he comes into the forum and starts talking about things. And then you've got the XRP .tips, which says confirmed, Ripple will demonstrate something at consensus not demonstrated before, buckle up XRP. And it's just this kind of pump language. And there was somebody from Stored, some marketing guy, who told me to cease and desist the other day on Twitter because I jokingly said, I was poking fun at the marketing literature on their website, and I said, the first 50 customers get 50% off this unregistered security, right? Lol. And he said, cease and desist using this kind of language in the future. I mean, first of all, the guy's not a lawyer. Second of all, there's no fucking way, dude, you want to start this conversation with me. There's no way you want to start getting legal with me, a guy who has nothing to lose, against somebody who clearly does have something to lose, a lot more than I do, in a courtroom, bringing up a topic you don't want to get into. You don't want the PR fucking fallout over this. And
I love the litigious language opener, like you cease and desist.
Yeah, dude, you work in marketing, not in law, okay? And
Chris,
I didn't respond to it because I didn't want to dignify it. I actually don't even have anything against storage. I actually think it's quite a sweet little project. So actually, I was only joking, and I don't welcome regulation either. But the point is that I just felt like it was a bit of an impotent rage comment that some like marketing guy brings up because he's like angry because like you see almost like a little scared cat who like stands up with all his like hairs on end because he wants to make himself look bigger than he is. And I was just like shaking my head going, oh, that's really pathetic and sad. Should I say something? No, probably not. And so it's just this idea that we all know why you're doing this. You're doing these ICOs because you want to make money, and you're using this kind of language like buy now. This thing's going to be in high demand. First, invest more than 50 grand, and you will get 20% off, and lock in 6 months, and all these kind of deals, all this kind of marketing language. Time's running out. That was the headline. Storage, time's running out. All these kinds of language is designed for FOMO, the fear of missing out. It's designed to induce people into buying, and they're not buying out of charity. They're not sophisticated investors. Okay, they're buying because they're expecting at least 10 times return. They're expecting to get rich, so rich that they never have to work again. And I know because I hang out in the trading platforms, I hang out in chat rooms, and I see the expectations on these people. They're greedy as fuck, man. They think they're going to put in one Bitcoin, like Pepe Cash. This thing was insane. People thought this thing was like 1 Satoshi, 2 Satoshis. They thought they could put in one Bitcoin and they would never have to work again. They were expecting like 1,500 Bitcoin return. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, yeah, this is like the next Doge. Like, this thing's a meme. You kidding me? They're doing like Hitler memes. They're doing all kinds of memes over this fucking thing. This thing's going to go viral. I'm like, fuck, you're nuts. And
do you think that the Joe Rogan quote comes into play here, where you look at all this stuff and people seem to be unaware of it? And what Joe Rogan would say is, I'm not that smart. I'm really not. And yet somehow, nearly everywhere I go, I'm way, way, way smarter than everybody else, which is very, very, very unsettling. I think maybe Tone has that going on too. Not that you're trying to, like yell facts at people, but just like your critical thinking skills. When you think about a proposition, you're like, well, that doesn't seem right. I mean, do you think that fits here?
Yeah, I think what the point I'm just trying to make though is that there are people that are pushing this. And then there are people that are on the receiving end of this, that are falling for this. There are certainly a sophisticated tier of investors that are playing this game and are winning it very successfully. But I'm really passing comment on the people that are running these schemes, the middlemen, because it's a negative sum game, remember. It's not a zero sum game, because you've got the middlemen, the people that are running the schemes, that are selling the tokens, right? That are really in control, the people that know all the information.
A negative sum?
It's negative sum because the exchanges and the brokers take the fees, you see. And the people that actually perform the ICO, they, of course, know the timing. If the market cap is hidden, they know how long it's going on. The person taking part doesn't know. So that's a piece of hidden information. You have information asymmetry. So the people with the information have an advantage over the people that don't. So that's the thing. And like with the Pepe Cash, certain people had information that other people didn't have. Certain people had access to certain, Pepes that other people didn't have. There isn't always going to be perfect information. If you control the information, you control the beliefs in the system. You control the beliefs, you control the people, their actions, and so forth. So it's already the people that are in that control system have the leverage, have the edge, have the house edge. It's worse than being at a casino, really. If you're
The
just an
people,
average punter.
the people demand fair access to their Pepes. I'd like to thank our 300 live viewers and move on to the exit question. The price of Bitcoin next week, higher or lower? Blake Anderson.
Let's go higher, but be ready for a correction again. Long horizons, hodl long term. But I feel like if I just, I feel like it's going to be higher next week.
Tone Vase.
I've been saying higher for months, if not a year now, so I'm going to keep going with higher. One last comment. I want to take this opportunity, since we were talking about Ripple, that Joel Katz guy that you were showing in the chat. I've had an interaction with him. I personally don't find him all that bright, and I'm just going to call him a straight-up scammer right now, what he's been doing in programming Ripple and the way he's been, pitching it.
Damn.
Chris Ellis.
Yeah, I'm going to go with higher.
And I always go with higher. Moving on to issue 2. Issue 2, European retail giant Alza to accept Bitcoin. The company plans to install Bitcoin ATMs and accept Bitcoin in its stores throughout Prague, Bratislava, Austria, Germany, and even the UK. Tone Vase, is now the time for Bitcoin retail? Did we try it too early before? Has the market matured?
No. We need Segwit and we need Lightning. This shit is only gonna make things worse. Like, I've been against like retailers accepting Bitcoin in forever. This is these stories, like, they're not, like, I don't care for them. Here's what I want to hear from this company. We have decided that this year at Christmas we will offer every one of our employees 1 Bitcoin as a bonus. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear them accepting Bitcoin. I want to hear them actually, creating demand for Bitcoin, not contributing to the supply. So this story doesn't interest me if Segwit had already been adopted, or if they had come out and did a little bit of research and they said, the moment Segwit is adopted and Lightning Network looking promising, we will then open up our retail side to people spending Bitcoin at all of our locations. Doing it right now at our current Bitcoin environment, I think, is only going to make things more complicated, not better.
Tone, how much did it cost you to send $1 when I sent you $1 before? It cost like $1.25 to send you $1 in Bitcoin.
Yeah, and
now is the time for retail.
And I asked you not to do it, right? Because people are like, oh God, you know what? I'm not even going to say it because then it's only going to make it worse. Like, let me stop myself there. Like, when people send me like $1 each, it becomes, it basically, that Bitcoin is now locked up in my wallet until Segwit comes in, because it's too expensive for me to move.
I had to bribe you onto our side like Roger Ver. I mean, like anybody.
I do think it's worth noting that this story has 2 sides to it, as they're taking Bitcoin in the retail environment and they're also offering the Bitcoin ATMs. It's a bit of a mixed bag. I think it's a little more interesting than the traditional retail play. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to be selling that Bitcoin at their ATMs, it helps a little bit, but I would rather, hear these companies announce how they're going to try and get employees to accept it as, as a salary, how to try to get the suppliers to accept it for their goods and services. Like, straight up accepting Bitcoin and immediately converting it to cash in the open market through a company like BitPay, which is now on my shit list and probably everybody else's who's ever been on this channel. Well, like, I don't want to give BitPay more business at this point.
They might email your money to somebody they shouldn't.
The suppliers is an interesting avenue, because all the container ships, imagine paying instantly for the container with Bitcoin, having a trackable payment method you could go back to, maybe even link it to the bill of lading. A lot of potential there. But let's go to Chris Ellis. Your thoughts on Bitcoin retail in Europe?
Is it too early? Was that the question?
Is it too early? Will it work this time?
I think it is a bit too early, yeah. And I think we've got way too much discord going on right now in the community. I really resent what's going on right now with the miners. And I think a lot of us just want this shit to be over. But the scientist in me just wishes that the trolling would stop. And I also resent a lot of not just it's not just Jihan and who's Roger anyway. I don't even know who this guy is. And when anyone brings him up, I just ask who he is. But it's also colleagues and people I admire who lower themselves to this kind of trolling on social media. And I think partly the format is the problem, the medium is the problem. And I certainly see it in other communities, online communities too. And I said this the other day on Whalepool as well, that there are lots of communities that fall apart on the internet just because you're missing 70% of all the nonverbal communication that you have face to face, right? There's a reason why, internet brings about drama, is because you have to work so hard on text to get across your feelings and your emotions that you can do a lot better in a face-to-face dialogue, right? And I think that micro syntax like Twitter, microblogging, just makes that 10 times worse. And I think that trying to resolve these issues in 140 characters at a time just is not the right way to do things. And what it tends to do is it tends to resolve into, or dissolve or degenerate into memes. And people just tend to communicate their feelings through these fucking images. And all that tends to descend into is immaturity. And people just like, posting up images of, other members of the community and vilifying them and mocking them. And this isn't science and it's not helpful. And I don't really, yes, maybe I found it funny at first, but now I don't find it funny anymore because my transactions are expensive and they're taking a day or longer to go through, and they're gaming the fee. Someone is gaming the fees. Persons unknown are gaming the fees on the Trezor wallets and on the Ledger wallets, so that now you're spending, $500 to send a transaction. And the only way of fixing it is to take the private key off of the wallet and to import it into another wallet, or to trim and try it that way, which not everyone might have the technical ability to do. And so now I'm looking into, diversifying into Litecoin, and I've been looking into, someone even said, am I being a scammer because I asked about an alternative cryptocurrency that had a smaller market cap, right? No, I'm not a scammer. I'm just asking you, I'm just looking for alternatives that are not scams, that yes, may have smaller market caps, because obviously I don't want to go into one that is already overpriced. But yeah, I'm looking for alternatives to Bitcoin right now because I don't see this situation resolving itself in the next 6 months, to 9 months. I really don't see this being resolved by the end of the year.
Some interesting stuff you said about Twitter. I see a lot of people writing on Twitter, and it's a real talent to write small, to write short.
Concision is really, really difficult. It's a rare talent. And I tell you what else is going on here. That there's a problem of people who like drama, who like shit stirring. Okay, they enjoy it. They like back channeling. They like going behind people's back, and they like stirring up shit. They like talking to one person. They enjoy seeing the interaction in a public space, and it gives them a sense of self-importance. And I've seen it happen in this industry. I've witnessed it happen firsthand. And the problem is they like to feel like they can walk into the public forum and they've got something that that is important to you that only they know. And they want to walk in, they want to say, I've got something for you and you need me and I'm important to you. And it's that feeling of importance and the feeling of being needed by your community members, and that they've got something, they've got the gossip, they've got the scoop that they're going to give you. Well, did you know this about so-and-so? And he's got this, and this is what's happening. And that's what I really don't like. And it's journalism is one thing, and good solid journalism is fine. But when it's just about gossip and name calling and finger pointing, and that's when for me it just descends into unprofessionalism and name calling, and I don't think that that's very helpful. We're not talking about the data, we're not talking about the science, and we're certainly not talking about any kind of progress in this space right now.
It's like Oscar Wilde said, brevity is the soul of wit, but not everyone is witty. Blake Anderson.
I don't know. I think that a lot of the desires that Chris talked about are latent in a lot of people, that a lot of people have the capacity for good and for bad within them. None of us are, pure beings of light and dark, and that we all have those impulses to want to be, included and to be, relevant, and to not do our research and have it automatically handed to us. And we have to resist those urges within ourselves and within the community and stuff. But with the trolling and stuff like that, like I don't know, I might have a weird kind of personality, but I think it's really, 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 really funny, and I get a lot of kick out of it. But when people are being really directly curt and uncouth, like not in a not clever way, then I have to like mute or block people, because then it's not fun anymore. It's like it takes something that was really, really fun, and it's like, I don't know, like you're having a tickle fight with somebody and they start punching you in the face. You're like, well, that really took a turn. Like, I really don't enjoy that. But back to the topic of are we ready?
It's strange, but we have no choice but to go with South Park for this idea of trolling. It's something that started out as kind of fun. You're on the internet, you're anonymous, you can make fun of people, haha. And then it became this kind of organized crusade in this campaign. And they talk about, I forget the theorem, but there's a theorem where, you know, someone pisses someone else off and they get pissed off and they piss off two people, and this whole tree of pissed off people that South Park exposed us to. And that's an actual network problem. That's like Chris is saying, science. That's a science problem, but it's something being used against us. It's like all these sales tactics, all these advertising, the FOMO that Chris was talking about. These are all psychological tools that are crafted and much more enhanced than we think. Things like, if you've ever looked at a supermarket and wondered why things are on certain shelves, that's all psychological. That's all payment. The things that are at eye level, they pay more. The things that are higher or lower, they're paying less. The shelf space in the beer aisle is a highly controlled and fought for market, where Budweiser will come out with different size cans so that they can take up more space. You'll see now there's about 4 different sizes of beer can. That's not for the convenience of the beer drinker. That's to take up more space and knock out these independent small brewers. That's just one small example. I'm sure there's lots of other ones. But sorry, Blake, I interrupted you. You were actually going to go back to the topic of Bitcoin and retail.
I was gonna say that, you know, anytime you have an impulse to try to I don't know, to make a conclusion about a large group of people, you probably are right. You're probably onto something, but you also want to try to see if there's anything within yourself that maybe you could contribute on an individual level to helping to fix that situation on both sides. Maybe I could be, you know, less sensitive or more aggressive or whatever would, and then maybe they could be nicer too. But I think that there's always, you have better luck when you try to identify a change that needs to be in the world, and then also try to bring your truth to it and try to react from both directions. In any way, shape, or form, is Bitcoin great and ready for retail? Is it better now than it was before? I don't know if it's better now than it was before, because it's more expensive now. For me, for example, like using my Visa card works really, really well. Like I use my Visa card all the time. I don't have a problem with it. But bank wire transfers, those are a huge pain in my ass, and they're expensive and they're slow and they don't work well. Bitcoin works fantastically for that, and it's a very important tool that I need to use when I need to, you know, move money quickly. So for me, Bitcoin kind of is like this super bank transfer technology, and that doesn't mean that I want to like push everybody out of using it as a currency. But for me, the big value proposition of Bitcoin is that I can move my funds around when I want to, and it doesn't take 72 hours. And then also big funds amounts being moved, like Thomas was saying, if there's like a shipping crate or something like that, if there's going to be a big amount of value that needs to be moved or registered, I think that's a good idea. Everybody using it at an individual level, I don't know, maybe Litecoin would be better. Maybe BitPay could at some point start taking Litecoin and help to alleviate something with some kind of a system that they could invent, instead of just, you know, demanding that we storm the cockpit and make Bitcoin go faster regardless of consequences. I think that there's a lot more thought that can go into this than just people saying, you know, we want what we want and we want it now. But I do think that it's also important for people to tell the truth. And if somebody's form of truth is in a meme that is really like, it's really cutting, I don't know that we should try to be friendly to the extent that we don't, you know, publish cutting memes. So I think that what you said has a lot of truth to it, but I think that we have to take all this stuff into the full scope of how people communicate and make sure that we don't, you know, nerf the Wild West here.
It's a strange irony that Bitcoin may be useful to send to someone overseas than to send to someone sitting across from you at this point in time. Let's move on to the exit question, which is a curveball. What about Litecoin? Litecoin's got faster blocks. Litecoin's got SegWit. Litecoin's got a creator. You can track him down. The price of Litecoin's going up. And the guys from yours just said that they're abandoning Bitcoin and going to Litecoin for their medium with a paywall service that they're now describing. Can I just use a magic wand and transform everything into Litecoin? Tone Vase.
No. I'll make it quick. Litecoin
but it's Litecoin. It's magical and it's got SegWit and Lightning. Lightning rhymes with Litecoin.
Litecoin is way behind the ball. It's not being used as a store of value. That's still Bitcoin. And the retail side of things isn't all that great. 90% of retail still takes place through Bitcoin ATM machines, and I haven't seen Litecoin ATM machines come around yet. 90% of the time, people are picking up Litecoin. They're doing it because they already have Bitcoin. Um, Most of the people are still expecting SegWit to end up on Bitcoin and do everything that Litecoin promises to do. It'll still happen on Bitcoin. And like I always said, if Bitcoin cannot get SegWit and Litecoin does, and Litecoin does become what Bitcoin was supposed to become, it's not going to be just Litecoin. It's going to be Litecoin and a dozen other competitors. And then no cryptocurrency will ever be considered a store of value. It'll just be a transient currency, because if people can switch from Bitcoin to Litecoin, they can just as easily switch from Litecoin to something else, to something else, to something else. It'll basically be the music download space after Napster went down. It was a complete free-for-all filled with a bunch of scams and a bunch of viruses. This is going to be the space we end up in if Bitcoin does not get its shit together and get SegWit in.
And now that was the original idea for Bitcoin. You'd put your money in, you'd transfer it to someone, they'd take the money out. It wasn't until later this kind of store of value idea bubbled up around it as the price kept going up and up, much to the surprise of the early adopters, I think. Tone, still there? No, you're muted.
Yeah, no, yes. I'm not disputing that, right? So it's I have nothing more to add, but so I'll let others speak.
Let's go to Chris Ellis and Litecoin and store of value.
Tone put it perfectly. Exactly that. Like it's called induced demand. Like you don't ease congestion on the road by just building more lanes. That just gets more cars on the road. That'll just get you more congestion, and that's not solving the problem longer term. And Digibyte did the same thing, added SegWit, and we can play this game over and over again, and more altcoins can add SegWit and Lightning, and more people can just keep on switching between all these different shitcoins. But it ultimately doesn't solve the problem of scaling, right? Because these coins are not currently interoperable. So I agree with everything that Tone said. That is absolutely perfect analogy. After Napster, you had a whole bunch of viruses and a whole bunch of different competitors. But yes, that exactly will happen here.
Excellent point on the lanes. I can tell you in California, they've been building lanes my whole life, and we still have tons of traffic. Blake Anderson, your thoughts on Litecoin?
I like Charles Lee. I don't have any huge problem with Litecoin. One of the big differences between Litecoin and Bitcoin is script versus SHA, and one of the ways that manifested was early on. A lot of people said that Litecoin was ASIC proof, which is like the dumbest thing you can possibly say if you want people to think that you know anything about computer science. So basically what eventually happened was they did make application-specific integrated circuits that could hash script with these memory-intensive areas where they could get enough memory to do it. What ended up happening was 25% of Litecoin's hashing power was in one room. I think it was in Indonesia, and that's not good. But now that it's a lot past that's like 5 years ago, I would have to look at the mining centralization issues to see if there's still a problem, and then look at the other differences in terms of the long-term conclusions about the difference between script and SHA. But I don't have any major problems with Litecoin. I don't think it's an unapologetic shitcoin like some of them are. So
Hey Blake, in light of what you said, it goes back to my constant argument. There is no freaking competency in development of any of these altcoins. All of the competency is in the development of Bitcoin with Bitcoin Core. That is why people trust Bitcoin. There is zero competency in any of these coins. I don't know, maybe Fluffy Pony, but I'm kind of biased because I like him and he's a friend of mine. I have no idea how good his competency in programming is, because I don't know if he's being challenged in it, right? Personally, I would like to see him be part of Bitcoin Core instead of programming on an altcoin. So with him maybe being an exception, I wouldn't trust anyone else from any other project in development. And I'm not even sure, I can't even vouch for him, because I don't have the ability to measure a person's coding and technical competency. But what I can do is I can trust a group of 100 decentralized core developers, many of whom I've met and many of whom think are smart as hell. Some of them are on the level of developers that I've personally worked with on Wall Street. And I know everyone likes to make fun and talk shit about Wall Street. When was the last time you met someone that worked at Goldman Sachs? When was the last time you met a PhD quantitative researcher? I sat next to these guys. I work with these guys. They are some of the smartest people when it comes to programming financial software. These are the people that Goldman Sachs hires. And some of our core developers are at that level. And like these people like embarrass me from their IQ standard. And this is why no other altcoin will ever be trusted unless like 5 of our top core developers switch to Litecoin. And I don't see that happening because then they would break the promise to people like me and others. So I don't see that happening. I think those guys would quit before they go and program for Litecoin.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think that a lot of what you said is very, very true. I worked, for example, for a Fortune 25 bank in math-based security information technology project management. So definitely that was a position where I was exposed to a lot of people who are just frighteningly smart. And then you go over into the Bitcoin space, and there are several people like that. But then, for the most part, everybody's trying to like hang out like they're the exact same as those people, when that's just not the case. And I think that when Litecoin adopted SegWit and the development complexity of Litecoin necessarily went up a lot higher than it was before, there was some concern in the Litecoin and even the Litecoin development community that development complexity is going to get hard now, because now we have this SegWit implemented with this version of our stuff, and Bitcoin doesn't. So we're not going to be able to take notes from the really, really tried and true systems of Bitcoin improvement plans, and that posed a little bit of a problem. And if there was any single factor that prevented Litecoin from just exploding past Bitcoin, I think that may have had something to do with it, hopefully on a deeply kind of a technical level. I'm a little bit more technical than most people, so with the Dunning-Kruger effect, I falsely assume that other people are going to see this type of thing. But I hope that, hopefully that information got out there and that's why.
Can I add one thing? There's nothing wrong with redundancy in computer science, right? So I have no objection philosophically to Litecoin existing and it having SegWit and Lightning as a backup plan in case things go wrong. What I suppose I'm objecting to is this idea that that it could be a viable solution and a replacement for Bitcoin. Let's not kid ourselves into thinking that this was not a contrived plan. First of all, the activation was 75% on Litecoin, and it was 95% for Bitcoin. It was much easier to get SegWit activated on Litecoin than it was for Bitcoin, and that was intentional. And Charlie Lee is a great guy. I like him a lot, but he was on the Bitcoin Core Slack channel. He was in the Dragon's Den. He is in discussions with the Bitcoin, posse, as it were, the Bitcoin Core posse, and it was to some extent contrived. Like it was to some extent talked about and discussed, and I think it was there to put pressure on the Bitcoin miners to also put SegWit through, to demonstrate to the industry at large that SegWit can work, and all of these rumors about SegWit being problematic, and it could these rumors that it won't work and there'll be a disaster, that they could say, look, here is a live demonstration that it's not just something that works in the lab, that it actually works in the wild, and there's nothing to worry about, and to allay those fears. And so, look, there's nothing wrong with redundancy. I don't think anyone is suggesting that Litecoin is a complete waste of time. It is absolutely a worthwhile enterprise. It should exist. Absolutely. It's now on Coinbase. So maybe we can say LTC on Gox when, well, finally it got its Gox moment. It can now legitimately be called a player in the industry. It will probably persist because now it's on a okay, Tone doesn't like Coinbase. I don't much care for them either, but it is at least on an exchange that does have, retail people coming in and buying coins. And so it's hard to imagine that Litecoin will ever again go back down to those levels, like $4 or whatever. It will be buoyant in terms of buying pressure because it will be in demand and people will like it and they will continue developing on it and so forth. And
I think it's worth remembering the phrase that Steve Jobs stole from Picasso. Good artists copy, great artists steal. Moving on to issue 3. Issue 3, Congress versus the IRS. One senator and 2 congressmen sent a strongly worded letter to the IRS questioning their blanket request for all of Coinbase's records, claiming that many of the people are not doing enough volume to require IRS reporting. Chris Ellis, are the IRS's regulations too strong and providing an onerous burden on cryptocurrency's users and attempting to halt its growth?
You're asking a guy who thinks taxation is theft if the IRS is
we're also asking the guy in the UK first.
Yeah, I think it was way overreaching and they were going on a fishing expedition. This all sounds like someone's had a word with someone who's like got a mate in Congress to, like, you know, have a mate with his friend in, you know. I don't know what's been going on, but it sounds like words were had to me. When I was reading that article, it almost sounded like surely the IRS can do what they want, right? Like they're there to investigate matters of tax. I thought they could do what the hell they want. Certainly in this country, HMRC can do what they want. And I fully expect the tax authorities in the UK to certainly go on fishing expeditions and to challenge Bitstamp and CoinFloor and all the European exchanges and to tell them to give them the data, like give us all the data, like give us the names and addresses of everyone. I don't see why any exchange would not comply, even if the customers complain. I don't even know why they would tell their customers, quite frankly. Maybe a warrant canary, but then why would they put up the warrant? Why would they even give themselves the grief of the warrant canary? I don't even know why they would put themselves through that, because then that would be bad for their PR. They would have to explain why the warrant canary went down and everything. I think if I was a lawyer working for an exchange, I wouldn't even advise putting my client through all of that crap. So I'm kind of surprised. America's obviously a lot more free than you guys, you libertards in quotes, make it out. You know, maybe Blake, maybe you can answer. I thought you guys were oppressed. This sounds pretty impressive to me.
It does seem like Coinbase is protesting too much. As we've said before on the show, the reason to collect those records is to give up those records. That's kind of the whole point of the KYC, the bank, all the things we talked about with Coinbase. But I think there's a large fear within Coinbase that their libertarian audience would rebel and revolt if they give over these records, as we expect.
About that. Because I worked on the Bitfinex hack. There's a reason why you KYC some of it, but it's on a case-by-case basis. It's not so that an agency can go on a fishing expedition, right? There are reasons why one KYCs. It's so that in an event where a law has been broken, there is a trail of evidence that can be gained upon by a law enforcement agent. Not so that a 3-letter agency can just scoop up all the data so that on the off chance in some future date, they can just go rifling through and say, right, let's see who's broken the law, because that would be a police state. And the
IRS is a part of the Department of Treasury. They are kind of law enforcement agency defined to collect taxes. There is probably, if you think about this from a manpower issue, they could probably script this. They could probably send out the letters automatically. The amount of manpower you'd have to do to get this tax would be pretty small, right? So
yes, but that's surveillance. Right? Yes, but that's enforcement by surveillance, and that brings up the philosophical issue. I think
welcome to 1984. Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, but there is such a thing as the Bill of Rights, right? I mean, the Constitution tells the government what it can do. The Bill of Rights tells it what it can't do. I'm by no means, an expert on the Constitution, but I do believe that the Bill of Rights does protect you against that kind of enforcement. Because imagine a scenario where everyone went around with dash cams, and the dash cams were uploading the data, uploading the video, streaming data to some central computer, and it was recording the license plates at all times, and it recorded every single infraction, every single, thing that you ever did, and was handing out tickets for every parking thing, every violation ever. I mean, can you imagine, like, every single thing? I mean, it would just be absurdity. And this is called
it's almost like we should have been more conservative with the penal code.
It also sounds
This
like
is
you're
called the gold. There
describing
was a country.
Zuckerberg's dream. I think
What's
you've
the
been reading The
word?
Circle and maybe seeing the movie. I still haven't yet.
There was a word for this. There was a country in the 20th century. I can't remember what it was called, but there was a country that tried this and it didn't work out too well. I think it all went up in flames, and they tried to take on two fronts in Europe. It just didn't work out. But
all right, let's go quickly to Tone Vase. To your thoughts on the IRS.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go the other way on this, and I'm about to get a lot of people very, very pissed. Now, I hate the IRS as much as the next guy, but this may go to Blake's point where, Tone, do you sometimes feel you're smarter than the people around you? And I'm not saying that I'm smart. I'm just saying that I maybe think about things a little more critically and a little bit further ahead than 20 minutes.
That's what smart is.
And from the moment Coinbase came into existence, the first two of the first three articles I ever wrote on my website, Liberty Life Trail, were about the IRS and how no one should ever use Coinbase. Now, here's the thing. I think the three congressmen, I'm actually curious what their names are. I'll look them up. Honestly, I think they are wasting my taxpayer dollars by defending the people, in this case. Because here's the deal. I'm a trader. I trade traditional markets. My broker reports everything I do to the IRS. If I make one trade a year and I made $10 on that trade would be reported to the IRS. If I do not file that $10 as profit, in a few years, I will get a letter from the IRS with a penalty. Okay? This is normal. This is standard procedure. Okay? I don't understand why anyone is pissed that the IRS decided to have a blanket request for all the info, because it's no different than securities law. It's no different than currency trading. The Coinbase is supposed to report every dollar that circles through it to the IRS, because people are using Bitcoin to trade, and the U.S. government has laws in place for this. Now, we can argue the laws. We can argue whether those laws should exist. We can argue whether the IRS should exist. We can argue whether capital gains taxes should exist, and I will be with you in that argument. But in this case, people that are using Coinbase have absolutely no legal basis to deny the IRS this blanket request for information. And the more they fight it, the more tax dollars they will waste, because they have the right to this data. Don't use Coinbase.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I said at the top of the conversation. I'm surprised I'm surprised that this is happening.
I'm gonna have to take the opposite stance on this. The government has certain anti-money laundering rules in terms of, like, I think the last time that I checked was a while ago, but it's like $3,200 of either broken apart deposits or deposits all at once in one day. You can try to launder it by depositing it in different teller windows, but they'll notice that amount of activity hitting your account, and they're required to generate a report that goes to the IRS. Not saying I'm a fan of that or anything, but if the IRS is asking for stuff beyond that from Coinbase, then there would be a reason that their local legislators and stuff like that would write a letter, and they'd be like, hey, you can't just do that. I think, though, that what the government...
remind everyone, they put all of this money laundering in the 1970s in an effort to fight the war on drugs. So if the war on drugs is over, why don't we end the money laundering war as well?
Well, and they keep adjusting the amount that you can deposit without triggering this thing. So it might be a lot lower than 3,200. Don't go out there and think that you're safe with my quoted thing. But also what they might say, the legislators might say, well, yeah, but people are gaining money in terms of either gold or measured in dollars and stuff like that in these accounts. So various activity that maybe wouldn't have triggered it swells and then triggers it retroactively the day after, the day before, and stuff like that. So it might be a nightmare for these people to try to argue on behalf of Coinbase. You are only owed these different accounts which are exceeding the amount of movement that you can take. But I can definitely appreciate them being like, hey, we don't owe you this stuff. I know it's, a police state and taxation is theft and all that kind of stuff, but I think that, them trying to establish their rights isn't the worst thing. I don't know that, if there is such a thing as even more wasted taxpayer money, that this would qualify as that.
And while it may be a nightmare for those attorneys, we know they'll be paid very well. And just for the record, the names of the people on the letter were Senator Orrin Hatch, along with Representative Kevin Brady and Vern Buchanan. Orrin Hatch, a very famous senator, kind of questionable. So it's interesting to be on the side of this. Let's move on to the exit question. Coinbase will give up all of the records, yes or no? Chris Ellis.
I'm going to go with no.
Tone Vase.
Yes.
Blake Anderson.
Oh man, I don't know. I think that the government will harass them until they're going to be like, fine, we'll just give them up. But I hope it doesn't. I think that Charles Lee is going to be against it, and I think that everybody else at the company is going to be like, yeah, we're going to do it anyway.
The answer is yes, despite the impassioned defenses of Mr. Charles Lee. Moving on to issue 4, Dogecoin Tipbot robbery. The creator of the Dogecoin Tipbot went out of business in a spectacular and potentially criminal fashion. After burning the little venture capital they have, the creator of the Tipbot, Josh Moland, according to his own Reddit post, made the decision to steal the users' funds, cashing out the cold storage wallets in a desperate attempt to keep his business alive. Tone Vase, did Moland do the right thing to attempt to save his business? Compare and contrast the Dogecoin Tipbot situation with that of Mt. Gox or Bitfinex, both of whom had similar problems, but with wildly different outcomes.
Well, it's not up to me to decide whether it was right or not. Like, I would not have done it, but I also would never have built a Tipbot for Doge, right? So, I mean, what do you expect? So far in this space, from what I've seen, almost everyone takes the money and run. And the people that do not take the money and run wish they took the money and run, because now they end up in court without being able to pay for an attorney and probably going to prison. Now Mark Karpelès might actually get lucky, because the 200,000 Bitcoin that was found due to incompetence on top of incompetence might actually over time be worth the amount of money in fiat the day Mt. Gox collapsed. So if Karpelès is able to pay back this money before his trial, he might not even have trial, which is great for him. But I bet even Karpelès wishes he took the money and ran. Everyone will take the money and run. This is why you do not keep your private keys with middlemen. Hold on to your own damn coins. And if your shitcoin is so down the list that it doesn't have a good wallet, it should tell you something about holding that shitcoin.
Blake Anderson.
What's the topic again?
Dogecoin Tipbot.
Oh yeah, the Dogecoin Tipbot.
That's why you had the Doge. You had the Doge and everything.
That's how I got the Doge, and the Doge distracted me too much. Yeah, anytime almost any business collapses, there's an impulse that people can start to like not tell the truth and like pull the wool over people's eyes and start to commingle funds and stuff like that. And that's not a good idea. It's really not a good idea. A very large percentage of white collar and business crime happen when people get into a tough spot and they decide to break the law instead of doing a controlled dismantling of what they built. So it happens a lot. Don't run a big business and then have it go tits up and think that you're gonna bend reality to make it work in the long run, because a lot of people get hurt by doing that.
Chris Ellis.
A lot of people that work in this industry are not, professional. They're just like, people that wanted to get into it, and they were like, enthusiastic at first, and they thought it was exciting. And then they got into it and they realized it was real responsibility, and then something goes wrong and they don't realize they've got a leaky cold wallet that's leaking into the hot wallet for several years, and then funds are kind of leaking out. And sometimes there is real dishonesty, and I've said that Bitcoin will expose you. If deep down in your heart you're a scammer, it will reveal you. Bitcoin will extract that out of your soul, and it will expose you as the scammer you are. But I think, having read the article that you linked to for this show, what I sense is that this guy just didn't see it coming, right? Like, he was just hemorrhaging cash. He was a bad businessman, and he was putting his own money to cover up for the fact that he was not solvent, and he was trading whilst insolvent. but his dishonesty was not speaking up sooner. And then when he couldn't cope with it any longer, he then started taking the funds out in order to survive. And that was, of course, when it all went tits up. But then since then, people have actually been offering to say, well, how much do the server cost? So I'll chip in for the server cost. I don't think, it doesn't sound to me, based on some of the comments, that people had an awful lot of money in there. I don't think we're talking about an empty box situation. It sounds like people, just have pocket change in there, thankfully. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, please, in the comments. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. But look, I think that there are cases in this industry where people have lost money through clear malfeasance and dishonesty and fraud. And then there are cases where people have lost money through genuine mistake. And, this is a very complicated and esoteric technology that is very new. And there are very few reference implementations. And so it is very difficult to get right. But I think that a lot of people that do try to set up these kinds of businesses, you just do not understand the risks, and their enthusiasm outweighs that foresight, if you will.
I just want to say something really, really quick. I won't go too long, but I just wanted to say that what you were saying about Bitcoin will bring the scammer out of you. So I said in chat, Bitcoin is to scamming as bath salts are to cannibalism.
Hey guys, I have to say goodbye. I gotta go to an event here in Hong Kong. I am back in New York on Monday night. I'll try and attend one of the after parties after the first day of consensus. I might come by the second day of consensus. Yeah, if you're in New York, you might see me out there next week on Tuesday and Wednesday for the events. All right, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, Tone. Thanks so much. And I just wanted to add to what Chris was saying. We don't have the final numbers on how much money was in the Tipbot, but Dogecoin is one of those currencies, like pretty much every other currency on the list, that has been pumped. So the value of Dogecoin is almost, I'd say, 80% of its peak. So there has been a lot of return to value. So a lot of people who had pocket change have real money again and now have lost it again. So I will say, and it's worth noting that the other major tipping bot company, ChangeTip, also went out of business, but to their credit, they did not break into the cold wallets and spend user funds. They announced publicly that their users should withdraw their funds, and they've done so several times since then. So
also, as far as I know, to their credit, I don't think that they sold to anybody, and that I don't think that any of those connections to really, really old addresses and people's social profiles, stuff like that, I don't think that any of that got sold to anybody as far as I know. So that's actually really honorable of them too.
That was an additional possibility, that the Dogecoin Tipbot creator could have cashed out his users by selling their user data, which according to the article, it doesn't seem like he did. But again, who knows the value of Dogecoin data?
Also,
Bitcoin's a larger market.
If somebody is willing to do what he did, I don't want to give him that idea either. So.
But yes, one must always be careful when you tangle with centralized institutions and you put your Bitcoin in, especially if you're duplicating the features of Bitcoin. Unfortunately, now we do have a situation where the high fees may justify some of these off-chain tipping bots, et cetera, at least until we see the real Lightning Network, not just on Litecoin. Let's move on. Exit question. I don't have one. So are you guys ready with a story of the week or a prediction?
I'm ready. I was just going to really quickly just say, Shapeshift, you can turn Bitcoin into Litecoin and back and forth. It's pretty easy if you want to, spend something, but, actually convert enough Bitcoin and Litecoin back and forth. I mean, the fee is still going to be there, but, the fees are the worst when you're consolidating lots of chopped up stuff and all that. So I guess just, the story of the week is, whenever things go up, like I said before, diversify and increase your security.
Chris, Ellis.
Okay. So actually, I'm going to hand over to Charnine. She's going to be on the mic, but I'm going to screen share because we've got two stories of the week we've been tweeting about on the World Crypto Network on the Twitter. And the first is the freedom of Chelsea Manning. So Charnine, you've been researching this more than me. Take it away.
Yeah, so Chelsea Manning has been in prison let's see, it's been 7 years now that she's been in prison, and she just got released 2 days ago. Well, now it's 3 days ago. And it was confirmed by the confirmed by the Courage Foundation, who's financially supporting her right now. I'm not going to say too much on it. We did do a show on this before, which gets into more of the details of why she received a commutation from Obama and all that. The one thing I did want to point out is that she's not completely out of the clear, because there was one article I found that it actually turns out that she's still considered an active duty soldier in the U.S. Army. So she's not being paid a salary, but she is technically still a soldier, which means that if she commits or she does anything that is considered a crime by the U.S. military, then she would be subject to the military justice court. And that could, when I say crime, that could be like writing a piece that says things that the U.S. military does not want her to say. You know, it's a wide range of things. Even if she gets into the article I found about it was even if she gets into a fist fight or something, she would be put into a military court.
Even wear her service military
the reason that they're doing this is mostly because they probably still want to be able to control her, even though she's out of prison. I can't hear what's being.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was going to jump in and add that it could be something as innocuous as her being filmed in public in any kind of military garb, or not any kind of, I guess, her own, uniform. So there's a lot of different stipulations that apply. That, yeah, I mean, there is cause for concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, thanks. Yeah, and the next one was Julian Assange. Swedish prosecutors have dropped the rape probe against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
Yeah, so this story just happened today. It was kind of funny because the way the scheduling worked, the Swedish prosecution was actually supposed to announce this on the 17th, which just happened to be the same day that Chelsea Manning was getting released from prison. But it took them until today to make a statement, and their statement was, now there's been some contention about this today because the obviously the original statement is in Swedish, but the translation of the statement was that they have discontinued the investigation. And there was some debate on Twitter what discontinue means. So discontinue, based on the press release from the Swedish public prosecutor, discontinue does not mean they have, like he's completely in the clear either. What it means is that the European arrest warrant has expired. So Sweden is no longer trying to actively get him extradited to Sweden. So when they say discontinue, what that means is that, you know, no European arrest warrant, but if he does happen to ever go to Sweden between now and 2020, when the, what's the word? So there's a certain time period in which, because the original allegation by the Swedish prosecution was made in 2010, because this case started in August 2010. And so there's a certain amount of time that, you know, they're able to actually, you know, pursue an investigation. And after that certain amount of time, then they can no longer, you know, actively pursue him because basically the charge, well, there was no charge, but the time in which they can pursue him expires, and that expires in 2020. So if he goes to Sweden before 2020, he could still be arrested, and they could basically restart because this wasn't even the official investigation, it was the preliminary investigation. So they could restart the preliminary investigation, and they could arrest him at that point.
And he's not exactly going anywhere either. The UK and the US government still are seeking him. If he goes outside from the Ecuadorian embassy, he will be captured pretty much immediately. So this doesn't exactly change his status very much.
And what did they say, Thomas? They said that he sought asylum and that they don't like that, even though it's a right that everybody in that jurisdictional area has. So even though the charges have been dropped, they're still going to arrest him if he leaves.
As charges haven't been dropped because technically there never were any charges. Because,
that's correct.
And you know, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but the thing that I've noticed is that whenever the news media have been talking about this case recently, they've been saying, they've been highlighting that there's one woman who is making allegations, like there's one allegation of sexual misconduct, which is interesting because originally in 2010, they were talking about how there was two women. The reason why there's no longer two women is because, well, both of them initially they didn't even want to pursue charges against him. And the reason that this case is mainly coming, like the press statements and everything are come from the Swedish prosecutor, Maria Nee, is because under Swedish law, I will actually read, because she gave an interview. Let's see. She gave an interview in September 2016. So this is the woman that she's the Swedish director of Swedish public prosecution. I don't remember the official title. But she gave an interview in September 2016 where she was asked who actually made the accusation of sexual misconduct, because the alleged victim said the police had railroaded her, didn't sign the police statement, and in fact, the first prosecutor on the case in 2010 dropped it, saying that no crime had been committed. And so that was the prosecutor in Stockholm. And Maria Nee's response was, "I am her superior. I am the senior prosecutor. I can in fact reverse the decision of one of my subordinates. I came to the conclusion that her decision was erroneous. When it comes to the question of who made the accusation, I've already said this. Rape is subject to obligatory prosecution in Sweden. You don't need a complainant to sign a complaint or make a charge." The reason she says that is because initially neither one of the women wanted to participate, and it sounds like I've heard something about, cause, I mean, I know their names, so I'm not going to say them live on air, but you can find their names very easily. One of the women I heard, she actually left the country some period after this all started happening because she didn't want to participate. The other woman who is still in Sweden, I can't remember her lawyer's name, but you know, I can't, no one's been able to really find whether she's still participating in this case or not, but she has a lawyer who's supposedly representing her. And so they've been pushing for this. And yeah, the statement from, I think Chris, yeah, so there was a statement from Scotland Yard saying, so this is a really interesting circumstance because, like, if everyone remembers, the whole reason that Assange is even at the Ecuadorian embassy right now is because there was a European arrest warrant for him when he left Sweden, after Sweden had already told him you are free to leave. He left, and then Sweden reopened the case after he had already left. So there was a European arrest warrant out for him. And so then the UK decided to put him under house arrest because he wanted to contest their decision to extradite him to Sweden. When the Supreme Court agreed with the extradition, that's when Assange went to the Ecuadorian embassy. So the whole reason he's in the Ecuadorian embassy is because he wanted to avoid being extradited to Sweden after he had already been released. And so, you know, the reason Scotland Yard is still going after him is because they say he broke bail. Well, the reason he broke bail was because, you know, he was in the UK because of the European arrest warrant that has now expired. So I don't know how much longer they can, you know, claim that they have a legitimate reason to keep him in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Well, we certainly know from a larger point of view here that Assange picked a powerful opponent to fight against when he launched WikiLeaks. He's been embarrassing the emperor, saying that the emperor has no clothes, and you have to expect something like this to happen to you. You look at a similar case of Ross Ulbricht, who embarrassed the FBI and the DEA and the drug fighting culture here in the US and has been punished severely for embarrassing them. So not that it's a surprise, not that it's a great thing. As Solzhenitsyn said, you can tell a lot about a society from the way they treat their criminals. But I think we're running out of time, and I don't really have a story or a week or a prediction. So if there's anything else from the panelists, they're shaking their heads. They're saying they're ready to go and read the chat and see all the exciting things that you guys have been saying. I saw Paul Krugman was in there. That's exciting. I've read some of his books, love his columns. I think Roger Ver was in there. We had a whole cast of characters, if you will, and that's always fun.
Krugman got really mad at me too. He started really hammering into me when I mentioned Litecoin. He was like, I hate Litecoin, only Bitcoin. And I was like, well, Paul Krugman's mad at me. That makes me feel happy. So it was a good show for me. Krugman,
of course, has mentioned Bitcoin several times in his real columns, and he's very critical of it. But it's fun to have him in the chat. So I look forward to reading it. Thanks so much to everyone who left us a thumbs up or a like or a comment and participated in the chat. We appreciate you guys, but we're out of time. Until next time, bye-bye.